So, I want you to imagine waking up tomorrow morning, right? And you grab your phone and you realize that the spam filter in your email it's completely vanished.
Oh, that sounds like an absolute nightmare.
Right. It would be terrible. Every single piece of noise is just flooding in, like the glaringly obvious phishing scams, those super aggressive sales pitches for things you'd literally never buy.
The newsletters you definitely didn't subscribe to.
Exactly. All of those irrelevant, random newsletters are now sitting right there in your primary inbox. But it actually gets worse.
How could it get worse?
Well, imagine every single one of those spam messages is marked urgent in bright red letters, like they are actively demanding your immediate, undivided attention.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you wouldn't be able to function.
You wouldn't. It would just be utter chaos. I mean, you wouldn't be able to find the messages that actually matter because you'd be too busy, like, drowning in all that useless noise. Now, I want you to imagine that exact same catastrophic system failure, but it's happening inside your own brain.
And, it's funny you say that because that is precisely the state of psychological overwhelm that most of us are operating in every single day.
Wait, really? Like as a default state?
Yeah, as a default. I mean, we rely on this invisible cognitive architecture to keep us sane, right? It's like an internal sorting mechanism that's supposed to separate the vital signals of our life from the meaningless noise.
Okay, so it's our mental spam filter.
Exactly. But when that internal filter breaks down, or honestly, when it just gets recalibrated by chronic stress, the mind loses its fundamental ability to prioritize.
So everything starts looking like a red urgent label.
Right. Every tiny irrelevant issue or every passing ambiguous comment from a coworker, even minor logistical inconveniences, they suddenly bypass the filter completely.
And they just land right in the primary inbox.
Yes. And it creates this massive artificial crisis in your body.
Which brings us to the core mission of today's deep dive. We are tackling a universally shared human experience here, which is the incredibly heavy, exhausting burden of everyday worry.
It is exhausting, truly.
It really is. And look, we need to be clear right off the bat, we are not here to just hand you empty platitudes.
Right. No toxic positivity today.
Yeah, we aren't going to tell you to just, stop worrying or to look on the bright side, because let's be real, that kind of advice is, well, it's worse than useless.
It's actually insulting when you're in the thick of anxiety.
Exactly. It's practically insulting. So instead of just repeating, don't worry, we are going on a mission to explore a really profound central question from our sources today.
And it's a brilliant question.
It is. The question is, why do we spend so much time worrying about things that rarely, if ever, change our lives?
Which is such a vital thing to examine. Because look, this isn't about ignoring reality, right?
Yeah.
We aren't advocating for sticking your head in the sand.
No, definitely not.
What we're doing today is a highly targeted exploration of human neurobiology, modern environmental stress, and just the mechanics of our own cognition.
We want to map out exactly how those forces collaborate, right? Like how they turn incredibly small, fleeting moments into these massive emotional burdens.
Precisely. And more importantly, we want to deconstruct the mechanisms we can actually use to strategically reclaim our peace.
Because right now, I think it's fair to say most of us are spending our most valuable resource, which is our emotional energy, on things that simply do not yield a return.
We are just throwing it away.
We really are. So if we want to figure out how to stop this mental spam from ruining our day, we first have to, pop the hood and look at why the system is designed to let it in.
We have to dissect the anatomy of worry.
Right. So why is our default setting so heavily skewed toward the negative? I mean, why is it that if I have 10 great interactions in a day and just one slightly weird one,
The brain deletes the 10 good ones.
Yes, it completely deletes them and obsessively replays the weird one. Why do we do that?
Well, to understand that, we have to look at the concept of the negativity bias, and we have to look at it through an evolutionary lens.
Okay, take me back to the caveman days.
Right. So the human brain, and this is a tough pill to swallow for some people, it's not actually designed to make you happy. It is designed to keep you alive.
Oh, wow. Okay, so happiness is basically a secondary concern for our biology.
Exactly. For our ancestors, surviving meant constantly scanning the horizon for threats. If you were a prehistoric human who spent all day, marveling at a beautiful sunset,
You probably got eaten by a saber-toothed tiger.
you absolutely got eaten.
Yeah.
The humans who survived, the ones who actually passed down their genes to us, they were the neurotics.
The worriers.
Yes, the worriers. They were the ones who heard a twig snap in the woods and immediately assumed the absolute worst case scenario. So biologically speaking, we are the descendants of problem-detecting machines.
That makes a lot of sense from a survival standpoint, actually, because the cost of a false positive, like assuming a twig is a tiger when it's just the wind is basically zero.
Right, you just get a little spooked and your heart races for a minute.
But the cost of a false negative, assuming it's the wind when it actually is a tiger, that's death.
It's game over. So our brains are literally hardwired to overreact to keep us safe.
But obviously we aren't running from tigers anymore. At least, I hope not.
No, we aren't. And that's where we get into what scientists call an evolutionary mismatch. We have these ancient brains wired for a deeply dangerous, wild environment.
But we are navigating a relatively safe, modern world.
Exactly. So when there isn't a literal predator stalking us, the brain's threat detection system doesn't just, shut off and relax.
It gets bored and looks for something else to fight.
It looks for a substitute threat. It takes a careless, offhand comment from your manager, or maybe an ambiguous tone in an email.
The ambiguous email tone, that's the worst.
And your brain treats it with the exact same physiological intensity as an existential physical threat.
That is wild.
Your amygdala, which is the brain's alarm bell, it doesn't know the difference between a hungry predator and an unread text message. It just knows uncertainty, and it flags uncertainty as danger.
And what's really crazy to me is what we do when we're faced with that uncertainty. We don't just register that there might be a problem. We actively build these terrifying narratives around it.
We write whole fiction novels in our heads.
We really do. Like, we imagine the absolute worst case scenario before anything has even happened. I'll send an email, not get a reply for maybe 3 hours, and suddenly my brain is constructing this entire reality where I've offended my boss, I'm definitely getting fired.
And you're going to end up living in your car.
Yes, living in my car. And we haven't even received any bad news yet, but we are already planning our professional funeral.
That is the phenomenon of catastrophizing. And it's driven largely by what neuroscientists call the default mode network, or the DMN.
The DMN. Okay, break that down for me.
The DMN is essentially a network of interacting brain regions that activates when you are not actively focused on the outside world.
So when you're spacing out?
Yeah, when your mind wanders. Like when you're taking a shower or driving on a familiar road or washing dishes.
Yeah.
That's when the DMN kicks in. Gotcha.
And because of that built-in negativity bias we just talked about, the DMN often defaults to simulating social threats and future anxieties.
So it takes a totally neutral situation and just artificially inflates it.
Exactly. It runs simulations of the worst possible outcomes, just in case you need to be prepared for them.
So my brain is basically running these terrifying high-budget disaster simulations in the background while I'm just trying to buy groceries. That's a perfect way to put it. Yeah. And this internal mechanism is exponentially compounded by modern external factors, too.
Like what?
Well, we have to look at the baseline speed of modern existence. Think about the constant influx of information on our phones.
Oh, yeah, it never stops.
The general ambient stress of a 247 news cycle and the highly curated, comparison-heavy environments of social media.
Right.
These things don't just act as background noise. They fundamentally alter the mechanics of overthinking because they keep our nervous systems in a prolonged state of hyperarousal.
Let's talk about that ambient stress for a second, because I feel like that is a crucial piece of the puzzle here. It feels like our baseline level of tension is just way higher than it was, say, 30 years ago.
Oh, without a doubt. We are processing an unnatural amount of data every single day.
Right. And when your baseline level of stress is already elevated by the sheer velocity of modern life, your autonomic nervous system is just primed for threat detection, isn't it?
It is. You are constantly hovering right on the edge of the fight or flight response.
Wow.
So when a minor situation occurs, say, a dinner plan falls through, or you encounter a random detour on your commute, it doesn't just register as a minor disappointment.
Because your system is already completely overwhelmed.
Exactly. Your mind lacks the bandwidth to contextualize it properly. So it turns a passing trivial moment into a major emotional catastrophe.
Okay, so if I can push back on this a little bit, or maybe just look at it from a slightly different angle.
Sure, go ahead.
If worrying is this incredibly miserable, exhausting experience that sets off all our alarm bells and keeps us in this horrible state of hyperarousal, why do we keep doing it?
That is the million-dollar question.
Is it possible that our brains, on some weird, twisted level, actually enjoy the problem-solving aspect of worrying?
Okay, keep going to that.
I mean, Even when there is no actual problem to solve, it almost feels like we are inventing monsters to fight because the act of fighting them makes us feel like we are doing something productive.
That is an incredibly astute observation, and honestly, it cuts right to the heart of behavioral psychology.
Really? So I'm onto something.
You absolutely are.
Yeah.
The answer lies in something called cognitive fusion and the illusion of control.
The illusion of control. Okay, tell me more.
When we are faced with the inherent uncertainty of life, we feel deeply, uncomfortably powerless. The human brain hates a vacuum of information. It despises not knowing what's going to happen.
Right, the not knowing is the worst part.
So worrying actually mimics the feeling of problem solving. By turning a situation over and over in our minds, by inventing these complex, disastrous scenarios and fighting them mentally.
We trick ourselves into believing we are preparing for the worst.
Exactly. We are essentially trying to control the uncontrollable by thinking about it hard enough.
Wow. That is a difficult pill to swallow. We literally confuse the mental exhaustion of worrying with actual productive action.
Because it feels like work.
It does feel like work. It feels like we are actively managing a crisis, so we think it must be helpful. But really, we are just sweating on a mental treadmill, burning all this energy, and we haven't actually moved an inch.
That treadmill analogy is perfect. And the real danger here is that this fake work we're doing has very real biological consequences.
Right.
Which brings us to the profound hidden costs of this behavior. If we understand the mechanics of why we amplify our worries, the DMN, the illusion of control, we now have to look at the devastating toll this takes on our reality.
Because if you're running on that mental treadmill all day and all night, you are burning some kind of fuel. There has to be a deficit somewhere, right?
There is a massive deficit, and it's what psychologists refer to as allostatic load.
Allostatic load? What is that exactly?
It is the cumulative physiological wear and tear on the body that results from chronic overactivity of the systems that respond to stress.
So wear and tear on our actual organs and biology.
Exactly. When you are constantly worrying, your body is steadily pumping out cortisol and adrenaline. It's like running a car engine in the red zone indefinitely.
That can't be good.
It's not. Over time, this doesn't just make you feel emotionally drained, it physically alters your brain architecture.
Wait, really? It changes the structure of your brain.
It does. Chronic worry strengthens the neural pathways associated with fear and anxiety, and it actively weakens the pathways in the prefrontal cortex, which are the ones associated with logic and emotional regulation.
That is terrifying. We are literally rewiring our brains to be worse at handling stress in the future.
Yes, we are digging the rut deeper.
Okay, let's look at how this manifests in our actual day-to-day behavior. Because the specific actions of a worried mind, they are so incredibly universal.
They really are.
We are talking about endlessly replaying past conversations, dissecting every single word choice.
Oh, the post-conversation analysis.
Yes. And feeling deeply, profoundly hurt by someone else's careless comment or a momentary cold attitude from a friend.
It is this relentless internal litigation of the past. And if we examine the neurobiology of that specific behavior, the memory replay, it's fascinating.
Okay, how so?
Well, memory is not a static video recording that you just pull up and watch on a screen. Memory is reconstructive.
Meaning what? We build it from scratch every time.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
Every time you recall a past event, your brain actively rebuilds the memory. And if you are recalling an awkward interaction while you are currently in a state of high anxiety,
Oh no, don't tell me.
you are actually weaving that current anxiety into the memory trace itself. You are reinforcing the emotional pain of the event every single time you replay it.
So let's talk about the infamous 2 a.m. replay.
Oh yes, the 2 a.m. replay.
Anyone listening to this right now knows exactly what this is. You are lying in bed, you're staring at the ceiling, you are utterly exhausted.
But your brain is wide awake.
Exactly. Your brain decides it's the perfect time to launch a cinematic, high-definition, multi-angle replay of a slightly awkward conversation you had 3 days ago in the break room.
It's awful.
You analyze your tone, you analyze their facial expression, you agonizing over the silence that followed. It's just endless.
And what makes the 2 a.m. replay so fascinating and honestly so destructive is the asymmetry of the experience.
Yes, the asymmetry is maddening. I mean, the person who made the careless comment, the coworker whose vague tone you are currently agonizing over,
They are probably sleeping perfectly soundly.
they are dead to the world. They haven't thought about that interaction since the second it ended.
Not even once.
Meanwhile, we are up all night, Our heart rate is elevated, our cortisol is spiking, and we are essentially punishing ourselves for a microscopic social friction that the other party has completely discarded from their reality.
It is the ultimate irony of overthinking, isn't it?
It really is.
You are carrying the entire emotional weight of a shared interaction entirely by yourself.
Wow.
And this connects deeply to a very poignant concept from our sources today. The idea that the more you carry, the more tired your heart becomes.
The tired heart. I really want to linger on that idea for a second.
It's a powerful image.
Because we often treat emotional energy as if it's an infinite resource, like we can just keep caring about everything forever.
But it is not infinite, it is highly finite.
If we think about it like a smartphone, right? Worrying is like having 40 background apps open at the exact same time.
Oh, that's a brilliant analogy.
You might just be trying to use the phone to make a simple call. Like you just want to be present with your family or focus on a work project.
But the battery is draining at a terrifying speed.
Exactly, because all these invisible processes are running in the background, constantly updating feeds that you aren't even looking at. And eventually, the core functions of the phone just start glitching.
That is an incredibly precise metaphor. The hidden cost of all this background processing is that it actively steals your capacity for joy.
It depletes your physical vitality.
Completely. When you are busy allocating all your cognitive resources toward protecting yourself from imagined future disasters or, litigating unchangeable past events, you have zero bandwidth left to process the present moment.
And the present moment is the only place where joy actually exists.
Exactly. So by trying to control the future and fix the past, you entirely miss the life happening right in front of you. You might survive, but you effectively stop living.
Okay, so this brings us to a massive pivot point in our deep dive.
Let's hear it.
If the default setting of our brain is to worry, and the biological cost of carrying all this invisible weight is a tired heart and a drained battery,
then the logical next step is figuring out how to stop the drain.
Right. How do we sort out what is actually worth carrying from what we need to just drop?
And this is where we get into the art of discernment.
The art of discernment?
Yes. Discernment is the foundational pillar of true emotional maturity. And to understand this, we need to completely redefine what maturity actually looks like.
Because society gives us a pretty skewed version of it.
Very skewed. Society often conditions us to believe that emotional maturity means having broad shoulders. Like it's the ability to stoically endure everything, to absorb every problem, to manage every crisis without breaking a sweat.
Right, just grin and bear it, be tough.
But psychological resilience argues the exact opposite.
So the goal isn't to become a better pack mule.
Definitely not. The goal is to realize that you don't have to pick up every single piece of baggage you walk past.
It's that vital distinction between problems we can actually change or solve and things we simply must learn to let pass.
And learning to let pass is a profound cognitive skill. It requires acknowledging your own energetic limits. Emotional maturity is knowing precisely what to care about and having the discipline to explicitly leave everything else alone.
Wow.
It is the realization that you do not have to hold every burden, you do not have to investigate every noise, and you do not have to turn every small passing atmospheric shift into a Category 5 hurricane.
Okay, I want to stop right there because I want to put this in a real-world crucible.
Let's do it.
Because this sounds great in theory, but I can hear the objections from our listeners already.
I'm ready. What's the scenario?
Let's say I'm in a corporate environment. I'm in a Monday morning status meeting, and a colleague makes a very pointed, passive-aggressive remark about my department's performance right in front of everyone.
Ouch. Okay, very common scenario.
Right. If I just smile and tell myself, you know what, I'm just going to let this pass, am I actually protecting my peace, or am I just being a doormat?
That's a very fair question.
Like, isn't letting go sometimes just a really convenient, socially acceptable excuse for avoiding conflict or running away from our problem?
That is a phenomenal pushback.
Yeah.
And the distinction between the two is absolutely everything.
Okay, explain the difference.
Letting go is absolutely not a synonym for passive resignation or ignoring reality. It is highly strategic.
Yeah.
Let's look at your meeting scenario through the lens of something called the locus of control.
The locus of control.
Yes. This is a psychological concept that differentiates between the things you can directly influence, which is your internal locus, and the things you absolutely cannot influence, your external locus.
Okay, so how does that apply to the passive-aggressive colleague in the meeting?
Well, the colleague's behavior, their own insecurities, their decision to be unprofessional in a meeting that is entirely within your external locus of control. You cannot force them to be a better person.
True.
If you spend your emotional energy agonizing over why they said it, or internalizing it as a reflection of your actual worth, you are wasting valuable resources on an unsolvable puzzle.
Because I can't control their brain.
Exactly. However, your response, whether you calmly address it in the moment, or document it for HR, or just decide it's so petty it doesn't warrant a reaction, that response is within your internal locus.
Ah, I see.
So letting go means you drop the emotional obsession with their underlying motive, which you can't control anyway. You refuse to absorb their toxicity.
Right.
You maintain your internal equilibrium so that you have the clarity to execute a strategic, professional response rather than just an emotionally dysregulated reaction.
That is a huge paradigm shift. So letting go isn't running away from the problem. It's refusing to let the problem colonize your mind.
Yes. It's choosing your battles with ruthless efficiency.
If I spend all my energy being angry at the rain, which I obviously cannot control, I won't have any energy left to build a shelter, which I actually can control.
Precisely. It is an act of fierce self-preservation.
I love that.
When you let go of someone else's opinion, or say a minor mistake you made 3 weeks ago, you are accepting the limits of your own control. You are gathering up all that scattered emotional currency and investing it back into your present reality.
Let's keep applying this to everyday life.
Sure.
Because it's one thing to philosophize about the locus of control when we are feeling calm and collected, but it is an entirely different beast when you are in the middle of a chaotic Tuesday and the triggers are just coming at you relentlessly.
It is much harder in practice, yes.
Let's talk about the mundane, everyday scenarios that act as tripwires for our overthinking.
Well, the modern environment is essentially a minefield of micro-triggers. We are constantly navigating situations that are practically designed to pull us out of our internal locus of control.
Like receiving vague criticism at work.
Or navigating the incredibly toxic waters of social media comments.
Oh, don't even get me started on social media comments.
Right. Or dealing with small misunderstandings with friends, or just facing the daily friction of plans that fail to go as expected.
I want to zero in on one trigger in particular that I think is the absolute pinnacle of modern anxiety.
What's that?
The unanswered text message.
Oh, yes, that's a big one.
It is such a mundane thing, right? Literally just staring at a blank screen. But it is a psychological torture device.
It really is.
You send a message, maybe it's a little vulnerable, or maybe it's just logistical, and then nothing. Hours go by. And that silence just becomes this giant Rorschach test for all of our deepest insecurities.
It is the perfect canvas for the default mode network to paint an absolute masterpiece of anxiety.
Exactly.
Let's look at the neurochemistry of that moment because it's fascinating.
Okay, what's happening in my brain when I'm staring at read 9:42 a.m.?
Well, when you send a text, especially one with social weight, your brain anticipates a response. It is actively waiting for a dopamine hit of social validation.
Right.
When that response doesn't come, you experience a sharp dopamine drop, which the brain interprets as social rejection.
And rejection hurts.
It does. In fact, studies show that the anterior cingulate cortex, which is the part of the brain that processes physical pain, also processes social rejection. So the pain you feel staring at that read receipt is biologically real.
Wow. So when my brain starts spinning out these wild narratives like, did I say something wrong? Are they mad at me? Did they misinterpret my punctuation? It's actually trying to soothe the biological pain response by solving the mystery of the silence.
Exactly. It's trying to close the open loop. But the solution isn't to solve the mystery. The solution is to decouple your emotional stability from the external trigger itself.
How do we do that?
Well, the core realization of emotional maturity is that not every event deserves a reaction, and absolutely nothing outside of yourself is worth your internal peace. When you stare at that unanswered text and allow it to completely ruin your entire afternoon, you are effectively taking the remote control to your own nervous system and handing it over to a completely unaware third party.
Wow. You are giving your autonomy away to someone who might just be like in the shower or stuck in traffic, or maybe they're just really bad at texting.
You are surrendering your power. The goal here is to break that automatic stimulus response cycle.
Right.
The psychologist Viktor Frankl famously observed that between a stimulus and a response, there is a space. And in that space lies our power to choose.
The space between stimulus and response.
Yes, by deliberately choosing not to react to the silence, by saying to yourself, this person hasn't texted me back, and I am going to let that fact exist as neutral data without weaving a catastrophic narrative around it. You reclaim your power.
You navigate a deeply mundane situation without letting it dictate the mood of your entire day.
Exactly.
But, and this is a big but, how do we actually pry open that space between stimulus and response?
It takes practice.
Because when my heart rate is spiking, when that amygdala alarm bell is ringing, logic goes completely out the window. Telling myself it's just neutral data feels literally impossible when my body is preparing for a physical attack.
And that's completely normal.
We need a toolkit. We need practical, tactical habits to protect our peace in real time when the anxiety hits.
And this is exactly where we move from philosophy to actual application.
Yeah.
Because peace is not a trait you were just born with. It is a skill set you develop over time.
Okay, so what's step one in the toolkit?
It starts with immediate physical interventions to short-circuit the biology of panic.
Physical interventions.
Yes, before you can engage in any kind of cognitive reframing or logical thought, you have to address the nervous system. The most fundamental step is creating a physical pause before reacting.
You mean like just taking a deep breath? Because I have to be honest, I know there is science behind this, but when I'm super stressed and someone tells me to just take a deep breath, my immediate instinct is to throw something at them.
I completely understand that reaction. It sounds so dismissive, but we cannot ignore the vagus nerve.
The vagus nerve. Okay, tell me why I shouldn't throw something at you.
When you are triggered, your sympathetic nervous system is highly activated. Your breathing becomes shallow, your heart rate increases, you're ready to fight.
Right.
By consciously forcing a pause and taking a deep, slow breath, specifically an exhale that is longer than the inhale, you physically stimulate the vagus nerve.
And what does that do?
This sends a direct biological signal from your diaphragm up to your brainstem stating that the environment is safe. It acts as a physiological brake pedal for your anxiety.
Oh, wow.
It bridges the gap between your reactive emotional brain and your logical prefrontal cortex. It literally buys your brain the split second it needs to choose a response rather than just firing off an automatic reaction.
So the deep breath isn't just self-help fluff. It's a literal manual override for your biology.
It is the circuit breaker.
Okay, I love that. So once you have flipped that circuit breaker and stopped the immediate physiological cascade, what comes next?
Then you can deploy the mental interventions. This is where you practice anchoring yourself in the present moment rather than the imagined future.
Right, getting out of the what-if scenarios.
Yes, it's where you actively curate your environment to limit unnecessary negativity. But the absolute most powerful tools in this kit are what we call the filtering questions.
Yes, this is my favorite part of the whole framework we're discussing today.
They are incredibly effective.
Because if the problem is that our internal spam filter is broken, these questions are basically the new manual filter we have to install ourselves. We have to run every single anxiety through these questions before we let it into our primary inbox.
Exactly. The filtering questions require the prefrontal cortex to engage in high-level evaluation, which inherently dampens the emotional centers of the brain.
Okay, hit me. What is the first question?
The first and honestly, arguably the most potent question is, will this matter next week or a month from now?
That question is like a mental time travel trick.
It really is. It instantly forces perspective.
It does. Because when you are agonizing over an awkward wave you gave someone in the hallway or a minor typo you made in an email, the anxiety feels totally all-consuming in the present.
It feels like the end of the world.
But when you force your brain to project exactly 7 days into the future and ask, will I still be thinking about this? The answer is almost always a resounding no.
It instantly shrinks a massive looming monster down to its actual microscopic size. It contextualizes the threat.
Okay, what is the second filter?
The second question targets the illusion of control we discussed earlier. You ask yourself, can I actually control this outcome?
Oh, that's a tough one. Because usually the answer is no.
Right. And if the answer is no, then worrying about it is like trying to change the outcome of a football game by yelling at your television.
That is such a good analogy. You're just making noise in your living room, but the players on the field can't hear you.
Exactly. It is a complete misallocation of energy. You acknowledge the lack of control, and you systematically release the grip.
Okay, I'm writing these down. What's the third question?
The third question is deeply pragmatic. Is this line of thinking helping me or hurting me?
Helping me or hurting me?
This forces you to drop the delusion that worrying is productive. It makes you confront the self-inflicted damage of your own rumination.
Because we always try to convince ourselves that overthinking is somehow helpful preparation.
But it rarely is. And the final question, which serves as the ultimate diagnostic tool, is, am I protecting my peace Or am I feeding my anxiety?
Am I protecting my peace or feeding my anxiety? That is brilliant.
It's very clarifying.
Because it forces you to view your attention as a food source.
Yes, anxiety is a parasite. It is incredibly hungry.
Wow. And every time we obsess over a little detail, every time we indulge in a 2 a.m. replay, we are basically pulling up a chair and serving that anxiety a 5-course meal.
You are feeding the beast. And what is crucial to understand here is that applying these filters is an ongoing, active process.
It's not a one-and-done thing.
Not at all. Thanks to neuroplasticity, every time you pause, breathe, and use a filtering question to dismiss an irrational worry, you are weakening the neural pathways of anxiety.
And you're strengthening the pathways of emotional regulation.
Exactly. But it requires repetition. If we connect this to the overarching theme of our entire discussion, peace is not a permanent, static state that you achieve on a mountaintop and then just maintain effortlessly forever.
It is not a final destination.
No, it's not a diploma you just hang on the wall and forget about.
It is a daily, sometimes hourly decision.
It is the repeated choice to apply these filters when the triggers inevitably arise.
Right.
But the profound promise of this practice is that a lighter heart naturally follows. When you stop acting as a storage unit for every grievance, every insecurity, and every imagined disaster,
You experience a radical unburdening.
you stop carrying things that were never meant to stay in your heart in the first place.
It's like discovering you've been walking around all day with 20 heavy background apps running on your phone, and you finally figure out how to force quit them.
And suddenly, the phone works perfectly.
Exactly. Suddenly, your system runs smoothly. You have the processing power to actually enjoy the view, to engage in a conversation, to be fully present in your own life. So if we just look back at the map of where we've gone today, we started by uncovering the biological trap of overthinking.
We did.
We are descendants of survivors whose brains were wired to constantly hunt for problems, and we've essentially dropped those ancient brains into a modern world that provides an endless, overwhelming stream of ambiguous threats.
A recipe for disaster.
Truly. And we looked at the devastating biological and emotional toll this takes, the allostatic load, the exhausted, tired heart, and the stolen joy from constantly replaying unchangeable pasts and fearing uncontrollable futures.
You lose the present moment.
We really do. But the way out isn't to just surrender to it, and it definitely isn't to pretend the problems don't exist.
No, toxic positivity doesn't work.
The way out is the rigorous application of emotional maturity. It's developing the locus of control to know what is actually ours to manage.
Yes.
It's utilizing that physiological sigh, the long exhale, to hit the brakes on our nervous
It's
system.
a manual override.
And it's ruthlessly running every single thought through those filtering questions to starve our anxiety and actively protect our peace. By doing all of this, we can stop turning every small, passing atmospheric shift into a life-destroying storm.
And, that leads us to a final, profound question I really want to leave everyone with today.
Let's hear it.
I want you to think about the sheer, staggering volume of emotional energy you have spent over the last year, just agonizing over careless comments, unanswered texts, social media comparisons, and small mistakes that everyone else has completely forgotten.
It's probably a terrifying amount of energy.
It is a massive reservoir of cognitive power. Now, if you took all that wasted energy, pulled it back from the uncontrollable future and the unchangeable past,
And you suddenly redirected it entirely into your present moment.
exactly, into the relationships, the projects, and the passions that you can actually control, what kind of extraordinary life could you build with all that reclaimed power?
That is the ultimate question, isn't it?
It really is.
Because the energy is already there, we just have to stop giving it away to the noise. We have to fix the filter. I want to leave you with one final thought to carry with you through the rest of your week, and I really hope it anchors you the next time the anxiety tries to pull you under. Your peace is too valuable to be spent on things that won't matter tomorrow.